Now, we have seen there is no mechanism to a theory of evolution, no evolutionary mechanism. Question number 3 is, are there any fossil evidence for evolution? Now, we'll check the fossil evidence. Fossils are remnants of the living beings which lived in the past. They are usually bone fractures in a petrified form. So basically, fossils gives us information about life, how the species appear in the history of life, what kind of species lived in the past, that kind of information. Now, according to the theory of evolution, as you know, species evolved to other species. That's the allegation. For example, this is from evolutionist sources. Evolutionists claim starfish evolved, they say, into a fish over 100 million years old period. Excuse me. So these are from evolutionary textbooks. If evolution theory be true, starfish evolved, according to the theory of evolution, starfish evolved into a fish over 100 million year old period. There must have lived in the past half fish, half starfish, 3/4 fish, 1/4 starfish, 90% fish, 10% starfish must have lived in the past, and we must come across their fossil evidence. Although you see only 3 stages over here, of course, there should be millions and millions of these monstrous animals, fossils of these monstrous animals, so-called transitional forms, which shows transition one species to other species, if evolution theory be true. Now, if you check the fossil evidence, according to the scientists, we have more than 100 million fossils today, which means we have more than enough fossils. So if you check the fossil evidence, these are, you see over here, are real fossils. Do we have starfish fossils? Yes, we have starfish fossils. Do we have fish fossils? Yes, we have fish fossils. Do we have any of these so-called transitional forms, monstrous animals, just like this over here? No, we do not have one single of these. Starfish appears as starfish and then doesn't change, and fish appears as fish and doesn't change. There is nothing in between, no monstrous animals. And this could be applied to millions of species. Species appear in the history of life all of a sudden, and they, during their tenure on Earth, they do not change at all. There are no transitional forms. Of course, this fact proves the fact of creation. The fossil evidence proves the fact of creation. For example, if you take the beagles, if we go far back enough in time, we'll meet the first beagle couple in the history of life. No transitional forms. And that could be applied to any of millions of species. They appear in the history of life all of a sudden with their perfect and complex forms, and they do not change during their tenure in the Earth. There is no evolution, no evidence of evolution, and the fossil evidence proves the fact of creation. Of course, today's evolutionists are aware of this fact. Mark Zenecke, for example, he says, a major problem in proving the theory has been the fossil record. This record has never revealed traces of Darwin's hypothetical intermediate variants. Instead, species appear and disappear abruptly, and this anomaly has fooled the creationist argument that each species was created by God. Now, of course, Charles Darwin, he was aware of this fact, about the lack of these transitional forms. He devoted a special chapter to that. In this chapter, Difficulties on Theory, he claimed that there are no transitional forms. He says in his book, why, if species have descended from other species by fine gradations, do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? Why is not all nature in confusion instead of the species being, as we see them, well defined? But as by this theory innumerable transitional forms must have existed, why do we not now find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the Earth? Why do we not now find closely linking intermediate varieties? This difficulty for a long time quite confounded me. Charles Darwin is right. There are no transitional forms. The fossil evidence proves the fact of creation. Now the Cambrian Age. This name may not be familiar to you. Cambrian Age means, Cambrian is the oldest geological layer in the history of life, which gives us the fossils of visible animals. Excuse me. It is more than 500 million years old. It's about 540 million years old. At this time, the first fossils of visible animals appear in the history of life. Charles Darwin, again, he gives another concrete criteria to falsify his theory. He says, if numerous species belonging to the same genera or families have really started into life all at once, the fact would be fatal to the theory of descent with slow modification through natural selection. So basically he says here, if the living beings start the life all at once in a breath form, that would be a fatal stroke to my theory. He's right. This fatal stroke came from the Cambrian explosion. It is called even Cambrian explosion by the evolutionary scientists because explosively, boom, all the species, fossils of the species appear all of a sudden in the history of life without any ancestors. All phylum means basic animal groups according to the body structure. All these basic animal groups appeared all of a sudden, sudden appearance. No ancestral forms, no ancestors. Stunning complexity, they have very complex systems such as gills, blood circulation, eyes. Of course, this is a fatal stroke to the theory of evolution and proves the fact of creation. Richard Dawkins, for example, again, this most prominent evolutionist of the world, he makes his confession about this Cambrian explosion. He says, the Cambrian strata rocks are the oldest ones in which we find most of the major invertebrate groups. And we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution, the very first time they appear. It is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. You see over here the fossil evidence. This over you see, this is the origin of the phyla, basic animal groups, according to Darwinian predictions. Darwinists, the evolutionists, expected something like this. They claimed first a single cell would appear by coincidences, and this first cell would diversify, evolve into millions of species. So in the fossil record, they expected a tree. This is the so-called imaginary family tree of the evolution. That's their expectation. This is the real fossil evidence. You see, this line represents the Cambrian period, 540 million years ago. Each line represents different animal group, different phylum, basic animal group appears. All of a sudden, because you see before the Cambrian period, before this line, no ancestors, no visible forms of animals, no visible fossils. They appear all of a sudden, explosively, 540 million years ago, 50 different phylums, 50 different animal groups. In fact, the number of the animal groups decrease in time. They become, today we have only 35 phylums, 35 animal groups. Of course, this definitely invalidates the theory of evolution and proves the fact of creation because the animal groups appear all of a sudden without any ancestors, fully formed with their perfect and complex forms. And this is a very good evidence that they are being created by God. And Allah says in the Quran, the originator of the heavens and earth. When He decides on something, He just says to it be, and it is. And with the word be of Allah, the animals were created 540 million years ago without any ancestors. All of a sudden, they appeared in the history of life.